The Project Takeover Blues. Did the client jump ship or was she pushed? I'm Matthew Raymer and my company is Anomalous Design LLC. For some years now, I have come to specialize in taking over projects from previous developers' clients that have stalled. It's a bit of a study in itself, this area of expertise, and I thought you might be interested in hearing some of my gleanings I've accumulated on it over the years. What I'd like to spell out in this video are some of the sensitive ins and outs of a developer taking over a project from another technical team, and of course, client. I do believe that to spell out well the issues that tend to arise in this area requires us to be viewing the task not only from a perspective of our own development team, which is taking over another team's work. We need to also view the sensitivities from the perspective of the commissioning funders of the project. We need to get inside the skins of how they might be seeing their seeking to replace their present team. There can arise a whole host of angles and fractal views from which angles we might view this approach. This then is the first of a series of articles I shall be doing, a series that will be looking at project takeovers. This opening article attempts on a broad brush to sketch out some of the main themes for the series. Discussions that can arise out of negotiations to take on projects part finished and for completion can to an outsider sometimes seem strained and a bit weird. From this point of view, taking over a project might look like a good sitcom format. Even anxiety and frustration can look entertaining from a distance. Because of this, you will almost always lack most of the project history being handed to you along with the part completed works. At best, you'll get a heavily colored one-sided story, what might be called the commissioning client's authorized version. Project handovers normally come to you as a result of an erosion to flashpoint of patience, trust, belief, which has led to a rupture. And this has escalated into an irrecoverable breakdown of relations between client and developer. As the client sees it, the other developer guy will always be the villain of the piece. An aggrieved client can forget that you yourself are a developer. He might start drawing generalities from his bad experience. He will be wary towards you, cautious, once bitten, or maybe he has been shaken and so defensive and reluctant to commit. He may become volatile once he gets started pouring out his bad experiences, even to tarring your trade and all its practitioners with the same brush. Depending on how desperate you are for work, you might turn a deaf ear or else plead a fully filled work schedule. Of course, we are all human, all errant sinners, and the guy might have a solid case against his former developer. Developers are human, in case you are not sure. Very few people do too much self-examination. As T.S. Eliot said, humankind cannot bear very much reality. Nonetheless, you'll receive a doctored version of events. The fuss and bias can be difficult for the new developer to know how to deal with. The best advice I can give you, and it's advice worthwhile me generalizing to an axiom for developers, listen. Stay the course, bear with it, hear him through. This route for obtaining valuable information that helps you complete the takeover project may seem cut off, but between the lines, a story often transpires. The client will be unburdening himself to you. At the same time testing, assessing you, he will put much of himself into his story and his grievances. Listening allows him room to disperse his take on the story and gives you focus to pick out from that story likely occurrences, familiar impasses. Again, not so good for the newer developer who has few backward years to call upon as his reference book, but we all started raw and callow, I guess. Once you have the name and details of the former developer, you might approach him and he might be happy to offer you technical background inputs. He may also have a story to tell with his own frustrations and weariness, so you compare notes. You listen to him too. Give him a chance for his version. So first, points to note. Approach the former developer to get his side of the dispute and any technical background and advice he is happy to offer you, to get a bead on the client himself, to assess in as far as you have opportunity and knowledge the objective situation of the breach, to find out whether the client is a decent payer, on time and without a quibble. This final point is probably the most important item for you to find out. A person can put up with a lot of frustrations if payment arrives in full and on time. Regardless of the technical help from a former developer, be prepared for a lot of deconstruction work, figuring out what has been achieved so far in the project. Whether the client or developer has been the inept or inexpert person, the net result is usually the same. The software you inherit will almost certainly need unraveling and beginning again, if not at square one, then a point well back before things fell apart relationship-wise. This deconstruction work is needed because at whatever entry point in a project and from whatever angle comes into it a feed of chaos. This can arise out of the work having suffered too often, changes of mind, out of an overmanagement of minutiae, out of unscientific expectations. These expectations might be the client or developer wanting to get a quart into a pint pot. Feature creep is an example a client can cause. Like a good leaven, unscientific intrusions in the form, say, of a client's overmuch expectation or, say, a developer's distraction and haste. These will have propagated through the whole batch of the project and have raised loaves of complications within it. Another general rule arises. The software build, the technical side of things, will go more smoothly and easily than will the management of personal relations between parties in projects. Unless trust and confidence, assurance and contact is worked at, I mean day by day, the natural trajectory of client-developer relations is towards deterioration. This is no different for many human relations in which people are brought together because of mutual self-interest and find they have to get on well to succeed. Once you have experience in these things, you'll be better prepared for the ball games of etiquette, for anticipating needs and hopes you'll meet with. The client very often carries over to your side a residual awareness of that bad experience he feels was the former developer. The client won't be wiping the slate clean totally by engaging you to finish up his project for him. He may be civil and polite and affable even, but you are on probation. He will be on his guard more so than were he a client with a project unstarted. So you have to have a little bedside manner, not mere display of consideration for his needs. Put in place procedures, protocols, frameworks that offer him that psychic support he needs to carry that load he bears from his debacle with the previous guy he hired. It's a little doctor-patient, a little like being in hospital where the medics tend to drip feed you the information gradually about what they are going to do. So that by day 5, had you known on the first day what you know now, you would have panicked and lit out. And it is hard to say whether a non-technical client is easier to deal with than a technical one. You may have heard that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and perhaps half knowledge is the most hard to manage state in a client. A client ignorant of technical things is a person likely not to accept being told by a techie he is baying for the moon or seeking the wrong sort of thing, and so on. He's the guy who turns his TV on and changes channels and volume, but since he has no clue what goes on behind the screen, his expectations, when it needs repair, are rarely commensurate with the situation. He cannot appreciate, sometimes will not accept, the limitations of IT science. He perhaps read in the news of a super duper device, and he wants from you something like that. A client who knows a lot about techie things, the question is always, why isn't he building it himself? Sometimes you'll be asking at face value. Sometimes you'll ask rhetorically with sarcasm if he's looking over your shoulder, second guessing all the time. But a client with half knowledge can cause havoc and distress. He can insist it can be done, and that he can tell you how, and that he knows the budget is sufficient. He of all clients is liable to go for mission creep and pile up add-ons, extras, and suggest damaging tinkering. You lose either way. Do as he demands and the app goes crap. Do as you believe, nest, and it gets nasty. The conflicts that arise between clients and developers is not surprising that so many projects stall, are handed on to the next firm half completed. It is surprising that so many projects see it through to completion. One rule is the developer will get the blame, so ride with that. Just weather the barrage. Those computer errors have nothing to do with the inputs of users. In favor of clients, I'd say it's generally true that developers are among the poorer listeners. At worst, some have minds made up beforehand. Developers have had a history, a long experience of tangled relations with clients. They too, like Popeye, can only stand so much. They too feel once bitten, and so now twice shy. Caution and measured expectations are their first lines of defense. And were developers as a group normally good at human relations, they would not be developers. They would be in conflict resolution where there is money. Scientific minds, too, are often liable not to suffer fools gladly. Perhaps that's why they are drawn to precision methodologies. Messiness, however, is the norm for more or less ordinary kinds of people. For the punctilious, such an outlook can be a source of frustration and irritation. Yet for handling people, a certain easygoingness, a broad willingness to tolerate others is called for. Training oneself to these things is doable, but very hard. The world goes round on give and take, making allowances and being made allowances for, and in this area of development, work is no different. If you liked this video, there are more from my stable. The topic of takeovers is far from exhausted too. I hope to see you again soon. This is Matthew Raymer of Anomalous Design, LLC, signing off, saying thanks for viewing. Please subscribe to this channel and like this video.